This week, Expedia's meltdown and Google's founders step down. What's the connection?
Then New York Mag says weirdness is coming.
And could CRISPR be the key to a healthcare future? This is Future Forward. I'm Stephen Rosenbaum.
And I'm Alexis Scordato. Let's launch.
And launch we shall. By the way, lovely tree in the background. It's very nice and festive. Well done.
Tis the season.
Tis the season. And by the way, there's a star kind of floating right over your head. So we're going to do this show in 3 chapters. We're going to do the Expedia Google story. Then we're going to jump into what's going on with weirdness. And then we're going to end with our friend Glenn, who's going to jump in to talk about CRISPR. And then that will be our not yet the holiday season full-on show. All right. So let's start with this Expedia thing. These stories are seemingly unrelated, but they are not.
Yeah. It's like a corporate governance mashup.
Exactly. All right. So for listeners who don't know what happened, because there's a lot of news last week, Expedia had a board meeting and fired its CEO and CFO, and Barry Diller stepped in to be the interim CEO of Expedia.
Yep. And the CEO who was let go, Mark Okerstrom, he took, I guess, the job in 2017 when, I'm going to botch his name. Maybe, Steve, you know how to pronounce it better than I do. Dara, current CEO of Uber,
Yeah.
left Expedia. I'm going to try it down. Khosrowshahi?
Couldn't even begin to guess.
Okay. Yeah, and so I guess, Okerstrom was sort of his successor, and it was really interesting reading the Seattle Times article, the quotes from it, Barry Diller saying that Mark was just such the natural person for the job. It was mountain snow flowing into the river kind of thing. I was like, what? Who talks like this?
So buried in the press, when the CEO and the CFO both get let go, usually you think there's some financial irregularity or something shady. Turns out it wasn't any of that. They missed their numbers. And the reason they missed their numbers, wait for it, was because of what they said was endemic and unsolvable SEO problems.
Yeah.
And what they really meant, if you read deep into it, was if you go to Google, they said, this is now the former CEO, the whole homepage is now either paid placement or Google products. And increasingly there's Google airplane tickets, and there's Google, travel advice, and there's Google this, and there's all Google products. And so if you're asking the question of Expedia, which is, I want to buy a hotel, get a hotel room or rent a car or fly somewhere, Google increasingly says, you know what, we got that.
Right.
We don't need to send you to Expedia because we got that.
Mm-hmm. So I guess it was described, I guess Barry Diller would describe it as a difference in strategy. Okerstrom, I think, understood, or at least tried to make an attempt, not to consolidate, but to try to get all Expedia whole companies to basically deliver more of a seamless consumer experience. I think with the sense that they could no longer be as dependent on Google as a channel. And I think Barry Diller very much questioned that and said that, the strategy and the attempt was actually distracting. And as a result of the strategy, they missed their earnings. So
we could, so this is jaw-dropping to me. So I'd love to hear what Barry thinks the solution is. Spending more money on paid search on Google? Clearly not. Barry's as cheap as the day is long, so it's not going to be double down on paid search. Would it be taking Google head on and SEO is kind of a fictitious word now, right? When people say, well, we want to improve our SEO, there's only one search engine, it's Google, and you could tweak keywords and algorithms till you're blue in the face. You're not going to end up on the homepage because the homepage is now 100% either Google products or paid links.
I think the biggest tension is really short term versus long term. Barry Diller is an operator who probably believes that, you know what, you have these individual business units, you give them KPIs or key performance indicators, whether that is expand more aggressively in China to prevent loss of market share to Trip.com, or compete more aggressively in Europe and take market share back from Booking.com. I think he's looking at the day-to-day business operations as like hand-to-hand combat in local markets. Whereas Okerstrom was probably saying that, you know what, long term, we're going to see increased consolidation, increased market competition. And if we don't sort of create a unified customer experience across flight, hotel, car, vacation rentals, etc., then we will lose to competitors like Airbnb or Booking.com, etc. And so I think I don't know, company culture struggles with this. It's like when you are like a laggard, you're falling behind, or you want to innovate, how much time are you going to give yourselves to actually execute on a given strategy? Okerstrom was like not given a very long time.
I have to say, as someone that's booked quite a bit of travel in the last 6 months, it is an unmitigatedly terrible experience. You literally open 15 browser windows. You go to the airplane site, you go to the hotel site, all of the individual owned and operated properties do everything they possibly can to say, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you buy from us, we're going to give you, mints on your pillow or whatever the hell they're going to offer you. But like there's nobody to, I think I'm on Okerstrom's side, which is it seems like there's a big unsolved integrated product opportunity. If you could double down on it, that would be like a much better consumer experience than the mess that is currently now a whole bunch of wholly owned, booking sites that all have required their own login and their own password. And then at the end of the day, when you travel, you're like, I know I've got a ticket on my phone from one of the, did I get it from Travelocity? Did I get it from Expedia? Did I get it directly from the airline? It's terrible, right?
Totally. And I think that's why Airbnb is so smart. I think they will challenge the market and sort of increasingly canvas every travel vertical. But they've been very deliberate to sort of have this focused strategy on, I guess, leisure travel, business travel, and now like luxury experience travel.
Which brings us to the weird little connection that I made between what happened at Expedia and Barry stepping back in and why Larry and Sergey are stepping away.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have no inside knowledge. I have no data. I just have my gut, which is, when you're a billionaire and you've got extraordinary resources at your disposal, you look at every one of your days and you say, how much of my day do I want to spend dealing with kind of like putting out fires and retaining employees and, dealing with Congress and getting caught, Larry and Sergey, if you go back to the history of the company, they've never really wanted to be the Washington facing, go testify in front of Congress, fight the public battle CEOs. They've never wanted that role. They've always wanted to be at the Alphabet's, high level, big idea role. And in fact, there was a couple of, I don't even know, maybe 6 or months ago or a year ago that Congress called Google in. And in fact, Eric Schmidt went in their stead as the former chairman because they really didn't want, they didn't want to be, and, they're in a lot of products and spaces that are controversial and complicated and frothy and going to get more so. And I think they just realized, they've got other fish to fry. They're going to be able to do more experimentation and more building from quote outside the company, but of course they're really not out. But they're not going to have a calendar full of, XYZ guy who we hired from X wants to come and talk about his role. Like some of the HR stuff, they never have to deal with again.
Hmm. So you approach this, your angle is just it's really more of a personal thing versus like a company performance thing.
Yeah, I mean, but I also do think that, you know, the reason why Google is a money machine is because when you type in Avis, as I did today, or Expedia, as I did today, or a bunch of other things looking to book some travel, you end up on a search result that you click on to get to the Avis website, and that's a paid. Even though I know Avis's URL, I could have just as easily typed it into the browser window, but because I typed it into the search bar, which kind of is the browser window, I'm paying Google to get to Avis.
Yeah. And
That
only Google can control sort of the cost per click. Like it is determining on through its algorithm if Avis should pay $2.73 for a click versus $5.21 per click.
but
It's like a false market.
Yeah, and the thing that's a little infuriating is it's not really advertising, right? Because I know the brand, I'm a customer, I already have a login. It I'm not typing in car rental and it's suggesting Google Avis to me. I know I want to go to Avis, but because Google owns Chrome and Chrome is my browser, like I just think I think there are big clouds on the horizon. There are antitrust clouds on the horizon. There are breakup clouds on the horizon. And, you know, I don't think if I were Larry or Sergey, I'd wake up in the morning going, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. I had a little bit of a different take. I thought my understanding was that Alphabet was structured as an entity to basically de-risk some of the innovation work that was being pursued by Google. So things like Waymo and self-driving cars, and maybe some of like its investments in like healthcare innovation. And so I actually thought that the structure was set up so that shareholders wouldn't see Google as sort of being overcommitted, right? And so if say Alphabet is going to invest in all of these things, and like, don't worry, um, core Google is kind of going to be its own separate thing. And so when I look at this move for Larry and Sergey to step back, I actually see this now as Google as a company actually saying Alphabet, the need to sort of de-risk Google is, I don't know, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's kind of like go big or go home. We are Google. We are going to innovate. We are going to have our core business, but we will continue to expand in other ways.
Yeah,
And we need a central leader to do that.
but I also think, you know, there's been some messiness, right? I mean, the Waymo thing is messy. Nest is messy. Like,
Oh yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's not easy. It's not a job I want.
but easy or hard. And by the way, I think you'd be very good at it. I would put you up for that job. But that being said, like, I think it's an octopus. I mean, I mean, I just have trouble imagining what Sundar's. What do you think his calendar looks like? How many direct reports does he have?
I think he probably has 8 direct reports max.
Oh, I don't see how that. I mean, now after Larry and Sergey float,
Well, I mean, they call it like lines of sight. So it's like if he needs to be able to say, I have a line of sight into these products and these businesses, and really have one point of escalation. And one direct report of his might literally have an org of like 10,000 people. You know, it's like you're operating at a scale that is
yeah,
so big. I mean, it really is more akin to like being president of the United States and having your cabinet.
yeah. I'm gonna say that given where we are today, that's probably a bad analogy, but we'll leave that for another podcast.
Well, chaos and chaos, right? I mean, it's not easy, it's complex, and there is a level of having to appoint senior leaders to have oversight over very large entities and operations. So,
Um, all right. So, you know, there are times Glenn, when you join us and there's a complicated science technology story, and I pretty much keep my head above water. And then when we get to things like CRISPR, I'm like, okay, I need the 100 level explanation. Presume that I like got through elementary school in this world. So CRISPR is important today because of a news headline we're going to get to a little bit later in the pod. But I just wanted to start by saying, tell our listeners what this CRISPR thing is and why it matters.
So CRISPR, it actually refers to a genetic system called CRISPR-Cas9. It's probably the most important discovery in science and technology in the past 10 years, because the potential is absolutely enormous. Let's just start really at the basics. There are between 20 and 25,000 genes in the human genome. So all of us walking around in the nuclei of our cells, we have a genetic code which determines to a large extent who we are. And what specifically describes that are these 20,000 to 25,000 genes. So they determine simple things like what our eye color is and whether we're going to go bald or not. But they also govern very complicated things that also depend on environment, things like breast cancer and schizophrenia and all that. But the point is that if you could control a person's genome, you could go along, because now we are starting to understand the genome. We don't fully understand it, but we understand big pieces of it. So, for example, there's a gene called BRCA. It's actually more than one gene, but BRCA is a gene that's strongly associated with breast cancer. Now, again, it doesn't mean if you have this gene, you're going to get breast cancer, but it means if you have this gene, you have a much higher likelihood of developing breast cancer. So wouldn't it be great if doctors could test the genome of a baby in the womb, or before it's even a baby, but it's a series of cells, say, or an agglomeration of cells, and they could tell whether this future person has this troubling gene or not, and then use something to change it so that that child will not be, that young person that will develop into a female person will not be susceptible to breast cancer. So there's been this hunt for something that would let you edit the gene, a person's genes like this, a gene editing system, and that's what CRISPR-Cas9 is. It's not the first one, but it is the most efficient, the most effective, and the best one that scientists have ever discovered. It's not perfect. I don't want to suggest that it is, but it's enormously powerful and promising.
I have to say this. It's not for this conversation. It'll be for a future one. But if I didn't say out loud, the ethical questions around looking at a baby and seeing some potential anomaly, which also could be, there's a whole history of brilliant, but highly functional in some ways and highly. Anyway, there's a whole ethics conversation about genes that we should save for another day, because today we're going to stick.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, but there was the movie Gattaca, for example. We all, what we were just talking about. You could go in and fix genes that are associated with breast cancer, but while you're in there, why not make the person tall and have great cheekbones and all this other stuff? I mean, the temptations are going to be there for sure.
But historically, everything I've ever heard about CRISPR was exactly the way you described it. Was about kind of going in and potentially fixing things. And now we're talking for the first time about detecting and being able to understand medical conditions kind of in real time. And then this is the DARPA grant. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, before we get there, there's one other thing that we might want to just acknowledge here, is that this isn't sci-fi. One of the diseases that is a genetic disease and is extremely simple genetically is sickle cell anemia. And it causes misery and pain for millions and millions of people all over the planet, many of them in Africa. And this is one of the simplest genetic diseases that's known. It's basically one base pair, one little tiny elemental, building block of a gene is wrong. So if you could fix that one tiny base pair, it's called, or even just cut it out, you could conceivably cure sickle cell anemia. And it's not quite that simple, but it's almost that simple. And it's the kind of thing that CRISPR is perfectly suited to do. And indeed, there have, people have been, on an experimental basis, people have been cured of sickle cell anemia using CRISPR already. It's CRISPR-Cas9 is the full name of this thing. Cas9 refers to the enzyme that's associated with it that actually cuts the gene. But this has been done. I mean, it's not cheap, it's not simple, it's not like an overnight procedure by any means, but people have been cured of sickle cell anemia using CRISPR on an experimental basis. And I mean, I think many researchers would tell you now that this is going to become, this could make sickle cell anemia, could eradicate it. And there are other diseases too that are similarly very simple that, CRISPR researchers have their eye on. But getting to the new news, about a year ago, researchers have began thinking about using CRISPR not only to fix, gene sequences, but to detect disease. So, the same thing that CRISPR does in order to, fix a gene, if you will, or edit a gene, CRISPR, this complex, this system has to recognize a genetic sequence. I mean, that's what CRISPR does. That's part of the big part of the magic of CRISPR, is that it's a genetic system, a biochemical genetic system that can recognize a specific sequence of base pairs, or a gene, if you will. And then it can cut using this enzyme called Cas9. It can cut there. And then once you've cut it, you can either just join the gene back together or put another piece of genetic material in there, using other enzyme. But because it can recognize a genetic sequence, it can detect disease. So, viruses are genetic in nature, so it can detect viral material. But because it has this capability of detecting this, it has tremendous utility as a disease detector. And this is very interesting, obviously, to a lot of people, because in theory, anyway, it would let you create a system that could detect many different diseases, not just one. There would be other.
And presumably DARPA's interest, among other things, is biohazard. So all of a sudden, people are getting sick. You want to know very, very quickly what the biopathogen is and how to treat it.
There is an absolute need for any military or defense organization to know in a war zone or even not in a war zone if a breakout of disease is biological warfare, or it's an outbreak of some naturally occurring, just a natural outbreak of a virus or something. Is it flu, or is it a biological weapon? The CRISPR technology holds out the promise of a very fast, very efficient, very inexpensive detector that would let you make these determinations. And so it's enormously attractive to an organization like DARPA, which is announcing the probable release of a $60 million grant to study and produce such a system, which obviously would have tremendous utility outside of defense as well.
Well, it's funny. I read that and I realized this is one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I don't know the scale at which DARPA operates. Is that on the absolute huge side of the deals, of the numbers that they put out there?
Oh, I don't know that it's among the largest of their contracts, but it's certainly substantial. Right. I mean, $60 million will pay for a lot of university grants, and a lot of graduate students and some lab equipment and some very smart people to attack, as I say, a problem that could wind up benefiting all of us, inside and outside of the military.
So again, I'm in charge of simpletons today, but really what we're talking about is a Star Trek, tricorder, right? Being able to pop it open.
Right.
It looks like a phone, but in fact, it tells you what disease you have.
Well, Yeah, and there was, some of your listeners might remember there was an X Prize to create a Star Trek tricorder like device, and a lot of effort went into it, and they eventually declared. I'm not sure if they declared a winner or not. I think they did, and it wasn't really. I have to say, it wasn't really a Star Trek like thing that was quite that simple and easy to use and as capable. This thing does have the potential, and again, this is far future. This isn't going to happen in a few years, but it does have the potential to detect a lot of different maladies and diseases. And but as I recall, I have to confess, I'm not a true Trekkie, but if I recall, the tricorder also did other things. It monitored, blood pressure and pulse
I
rate.
mostly just remember the sound.
Right. It was a cool sound. It was a very cool sound.
You know what? I may actually. I found an original tricorder 2 weeks ago and recorded the sound, so maybe I'll just add it in here.
Absolutely. There's a beautiful sound. But the upshot is that CRISPR is as I say, it's probably the most important thing that's happened in science and technology in the past 10 years. Anything that has the power to precisely, efficiently, and inexpensively edit our genes is, obviously potentially life-changing. I mean, it's a revolution. Now, again, I don't want to leave the impression that CRISPR is flawless. There's been a lot of concern. There's been some discovery that CRISPR editing may not be quite as clean and precise as some thought. There have been suggestions that sometimes the CRISPR system kind of goes rogue and alters genes that it wasn't supposed to alter, that are puzzling. Why did it go there? There's also some concern that some of that alteration could lead to cancers and so on. So, CRISPR has a ways to go before it becomes, a completely trustworthy, reliable system to tackle these dread diseases. And then if it ever reaches that, which certainly a lot of smart people think it will, there's going to be these also concerns that we discussed earlier about, like eugenics and so on. But
I have to say, I liked when we were ending on the optimistic note.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it really does have enormous potential because you look at some of the greatest diseases afflicting us now, HIV, cancer, all these things are highly genetic in their fundamental nature, and something that could allow us to spot these things and fix them before an emerging life is even an embryo is it's an incredibly exciting thing.
Glenn,
really.
Thank you, much appreciated. I will pass this on to Alexa, who will review it and then come back and criticize both of us. But have an excellent week, and thanks a lot.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Steve.
So let's move on to the weirdness section of the show, because I gotta say, I love this article and I read it.
This was the best end of year article I've read so far.
Listeners, so this is a New York Magazine article that for those of you who are watching, you'll see the cover pop up in a second. And basically the headline is "The Weirdness is Coming." And I just think weirdness is such a perfect word for where we are. It's not all future is exciting. It's not all future is scary. It's weirdness. Just, things are complicated and they have good parts and bad parts, and it's not and so we recommend this article, loyal listeners. It is online. Go to nymag.com and search for weirdness. And we'll have the links in the show notes as well. But we picked out just a couple of weirdness headlines that we thought were worthy of our exploration. So
yeah, just to add, everyone is trying to make predictions, right? It's the time of year. It's the year of roundups and then predictions. And what's unique about this year is everyone's doing it like in decade increments. So the structure of the article is, what were 2019 headlines that are informing 10-year out predictions, which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right, so let's start with, we won't get through all of them just because of time, but let's just start with, we will never know if a movie is a hit in the future.
Yeah, it's true. I don't even know today. Like, forget the future. Like, The Irishman, is it a hit? People are talking about it, people are reading about it, but like, it's streaming now.
Yeah,
It had a limited release in theaters and it's streaming. It's like a great example of like, this is just going to continue.
and the data, which is, X tens of millions of people clicked on it, and then when did they abandon it? Because that was never true in the days of the movie theater. If you got your popcorn and your Coke and you paid your movie ticket, you were going to sit in that chair for 90 minutes. It would have had to have been hellish bad for you to get up and walk out. Almost never happened.
Right.
But on Netflix, my guess is, from what I'm hearing from my network, that lots of people clicked on The Irishman. Lots of people watched about the first 90 minutes of it and then walked away.
Yeah. It's also that movie, last year was the black and white movie that took place in Mexico.
Yep.
Roma.
Yep.
I also didn't get through it.
I saw it and liked it very much, but I think if in theaters it was probably better.
Okay.
I saw, but Pam and I saw Parasite in the theater, and I think I would have not. I mean, I would have watched it on the TV, but I loved it in the theater.
Okay. It's on my list.
All right. So number 2, the television era of politics will end. Or I would argue has already ended, but and then the subheadline is AOC talks to her followers via Donkey Kong Twitch live stream. Everyone in the audience who knows what Donkey Kong Twitch is, raise your hand. That would be probably none of our listeners, hopefully some. The era of TV of television era politics ending is a big damn deal.
Do you think it's bigger than, I don't know, is there a historic equivalent? Like, say, when TV sort of became prevalent in the media landscape and eclipsed radio?
So TV was visual from the day that it was launched, but it was always authoritarian. It was always top down. It was always, we're CBS and we're going to say that's the way it is, and we're going to filter in a lot of voices, but we're going to come up with a stand, a tone, and a political point of view, or a bit of information that's going to feel like big media. And I think maybe even if I were retitling this, the television era of politics ending, it's really more the era of mainstream, big, authoritarian, top-down media ending.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it hasn't totally ended, but it's certainly shifted. Like, TV moments have dwindled in terms of scope and impact. Like, yes, we have the Super Bowl. Yes, we have the Oscars, but like the American population sort of being tuned in, I feel like I don't know, I might have been like the last generation to actually experience consuming media in sort of or like looking at TV as sort of the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, and what worries me about this from a political point of view is, it essentially means the loudest voice, the most controversial voice, the most shocking voice, the most disturbing voice wins. In an era where everyone's a media company, the person who's the most.
About that. I mean, I think Obama during his campaign, first time around, like, he showed that if you are digitally savvy and you found new channels to engage constituents, that it could be effective.
Yeah, I disagree with you 1,000%.
Oh, why?
Because Obama was an entirely different era in digital media.
So you don't think that in general that there will be new channels, new audiences, and that politicians will have to become increasingly savvy in order to do it? That in general, media, like journalists and broadcasters, are in some ways like, I don't know, uh, like they have a role to play.
It's a longer conversation, but I mean, if you look at, Twitter didn't have any impact in Obama's presidency. We're not putting that back in the box. It's, for a while I thought maybe Trump will leave and we'll go back to not having politicians communicate on Twitter. But, the bottom line is Twitter has become the distribution of urgent, timely, short form messaging for governments, for school districts, for politicians, anyway. But so television era politics is going to end. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thesis, but terrifying. But it's not like anything better is going to come along. All right, let's go to something different, because I thought this one was kind of surprising. You will never wear makeup.
Yeah. So this speaks to sort of the idea of like technology and filters and apps sort of doing it for you. If you look in the article, they have Putin like with lipstick on, and it's hilarious. We see this now. I don't know, Steve, if you've ever been on a Zoom call, but there's a setting in Zoom where it'll like enhance your video feed.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a little oversimplified as a heading, but I do think this idea of your digital and online presence being enhanced by default is interesting.
Well, I mean, one could argue that the idea of people being concerned about their appearance and hair and makeup and whatever, I mean, this is not a new thing, right? I mean, as I walk home from the subway at the end of the day, there's a fingernail place that now has a great big poster in the window that says that they will do semi-permanent makeup for you for $800.
Oh, like tattoo your eyebrows and stuff?
Yeah. But my immediate reaction is, A, that's a lot of flipping money. And B, semi-permanent means what? 5 years versus forever, or 6 months? Anyway, so Putin clearly has semi-permanent digital makeup on, but it does mean that we're going to have, will that mean that you'll have like an Alexa business AI setting and an Alexa going out for the weekend party? Like, will you literally have different personas, digital personas? Yeah, I'm going to say yes to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can say it's like they're photographers and Instagrammers now who sort of have like custom filters, right, for their photos, and so it's just extending that.
All right, so no more makeup. This one is very near and dear to my heart because it's a lot of what I'm doing on a daily basis. Hold on one second, I'm scrolling there. We will read and write like robots.
Yep. So this is like rooted in sort of AI generated text and like smart replies. So like I don't know if you've set up like shortcuts on your phone, Steve, but like I have like a few things that I can just like share out really quickly, like, what do you want for dinner? If I actually type in 1, 2, 3 on my phone, it'll actually like text out, what do you want for dinner?
Okay, that will be Alexa's smart tip of the week. There are literally things I write by hand every day for no good reason, and I will fix that.
Shortcuts.
But look, here's the problem with these robotic responses, right? So LinkedIn, somebody puts something up on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn suggests 3 or 4 answers. Cool, no problem, thanks a lot, appreciate it. And you're like, wait, I don't want to use one of those. I want to write my own response. But I was going to say that. Like,
right.
So if I'm clicking on it, does it become less authentic if I don't type the letters into the screen?
I don't know. I mean, Google's are actually pretty good. I don't know if you use Gmail, it's so smart because it'll already understand the context of the message to a certain point, and it'll say like, thanks, or, I'll let you know, or I don't know.
But again, the world we're moving toward and why this is a future, and the subhead here is that OpenAI claims that news writing AI is too dangerous. Its news writing AI is too dangerous to publicly release. Um, I think that we're in this, kind of war where the robots are writing more, and then the articles are coming at me faster, and then I have to read them faster. So really, I want to have a robot to gather all the headlines and filter out. If I've read that story one time, I don't need to see it again 6 more times.
Yeah. I mean, there's like we've talked about this in the past, but they're already formulaic articles, whether it's like Wall Street analysts, right? Like if you want to do like a recall earnings report, or even like sports, right? Like sports recaps, that's already done in an automated way.
Yep. Yep. We're gonna be demoing some of that technology at our Machines and Media conference at Bloomberg later in the spring.
I was looking at a music application here. Like, there's enough data that tells you like what chord progressions are hits versus not, what sounds good to humans versus not. I also think that like most hits will not be generated or written by original artists.
All right, two more. Two more. There will be deliveries by drone, but also stalking and even drone assassinations by terrorists and civilians.
I'm not ready for this one. I mean, the drone delivery thing, who knows? It's like the airspace and the idea of regulating that and safety. I don't know if we're going to get there in 10 years.
Yeah, we are. But I just think about the people that do executive security and the fact that there are now little drones the size of a butterfly that go bzzz, and how you protect your protectee from a little butterfly-ish thing flying past the security and getting up to your executive and firing a little dart with some, I just they've got to have gamed that out 1,000 ways, but there can't be any way. I mean, maybe you put up some kind of electronic buffer zone around everyone so that things can't fly near them. I don't even know.
Wild. I don't know. The only way I can sort of be at peace with this thought is like if the drones are more like the owls in Harry Potter, where they're really just like delivering messages, like carrier pigeons.
Look, it's the other thing I will say is this. It's easy to forget, as someone who lives in New York, that the world does not live in tall buildings. I mean, for me, taking any of the windows of my apartment and adding a little delivery box outside the window with a slot on it. I mean, I could imagine calling a restaurant for food delivery and having a little drone fly up and park in my window and beep, and then I open the little door and there's my, like, doesn't have to come up the elevator, doesn't have to bother the front doorman. I could see every apartment in my building having a drone delivery slot in it in 10 years.
Yeah.
Probably not as much if you're in the suburbs. All right. And then last but not least, because this was a fun one to end on, we will import our pop culture from China.
Yeah. So do you have TikTok, Steve?
I do, in fact.
Yeah. So TikTok is like the first time I'm like, wow, like this is not a Silicon Valley based startup that has sort of become very dominant, and what it's doing is really interesting.
So for our listeners, like, I guess I thought of TikTok as a kids thing.
And that's how it always starts.
Right?
Facebook is a kids thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean it. I think when we think of technology and trends as a kids thing, it's because it starts out from a place of fandom and the need to express, right? And I actually think that's why the internet was a draw for many of us to begin with, because it was this canvas to kind of express who you are. And so for TikTok to sort of capture this moment where people want to share and be creative, it's actually amazing, and I applaud it for that.
Um, where does Snap fit into your social media space?
It doesn't. I mean, I tried using it. I thought it was interesting, ephemeral content, but I'm not a fan. It was the first technology though where I was like, oh, I'm officially like on the other side. I'm no longer like the cool early adopter.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard much about Snap lately, which is kind of why I asked. All right. Well, with that, we've given you a glimpse into the future, but we strongly recommend that you go to New York Mag and read it for yourself, and then get back to us with comments and tell us we missed the good ones, although we did try. With that, Alexa, we are out of time.
Yep.
Back again next week with more fun.
Sounds great.
See
Have
you
a good
then.
one.